Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Suick Seminar Series, episode number 5. Tonight's program is all about having early season success. Your first days out on the water of the year, at least for us in Canada. Some of you in the States have been fishing for a long time already. Some of you have been fishing all year already, but we're going to talk about early season success, and what that means this time of year is understanding the spawn. It means understanding pre-spawn behavior, means understanding spawning activities, means understanding especially post-spawn rituals, who recovers faster, how they recover, when they're ready to bite. And so we're going to talk about all of that on our program this evening. The spawn is by far the most important time of the year for muskies for a number of reasons. If you're in a natural fish fishery, which we're going to talk about a number of times through the show, and especially at the end of the show, the success of the spawn determines the future of your muskie population and determines how good your fishery is going to be. So we all cheer for that very successful spawning, for our muskies to have a very successful spring and a very successful spawn. It's also the time of year where muskies experience the highest rate of natural mortality. All a muskie's resources are devoted to reproduction, its ability to fight off disease, compromised, its ability to fight off injury, compromised, and the spawn itself is very rough on the fish. So it has the highest mortality rate, highest natural mortality rate of any time of year. And another thing you should know about early season success, it is probably your best chance to catch a 50-inch fish or the biggest fish of your season, bar none. Most people think it's the fall. I love fall fishing, but that 2 to 3 weeks following the spawn in the spring is a time of year when we catch 50s, and multiple 50s just about every year. So stay tuned. We'll tell you all about that. As usual, this is an interactive broadcast. We encourage your participation and your questions. And so we will pick out questions that you send in for us to discuss. And I have 3 questions for you to consider right off the bat. If you want to tell us about your best and your worst start, and maybe why, we can get those comments on. If you want to tell us, do you downsize your baits at the start of the year? And we'll tell you what we think about downsizing baits. It's common practice for muskie hunters north and south of the border. We'll talk about that a little bit, and maybe your best lure selections in the spring. What works best for you personally? So if you're inclined, send in those comments and those questions, and we'll try and get to them. And as usual, if we don't get to them now, we'll get to them post-show. We'll get back to you with a personal answer to whatever you've sent in. It's time to introduce our team. As usual, the usual suspects. Brent Bocek from Fish NV, a full-time guide, a muskie guide, a multi-species guide. Hey, Brent, how are you doing?
You know what, John? I'm excited for tonight, yet I'm a little sad because I'm excited because we got a great show coming up, but it's going to be our last one for this year.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be our last one for this year. I thought about that in saying goodbye, and we'll say it's our last one for now, and we'll see you soon. We'll just leave it at that. So, you never know. You got to leave that door open. So good to see you as always, my friend, Lisa Goodyear, our head guide at the Ottawa River Muskie Factory, the queen of the Ottawa River. Good to see you as always, Lisa.
Thanks, John.
And our newest guy, newest member of the team, we're letting Noah run the technical aspects of our broadcast tonight. Hope that works out for all of you. It's good to have Noah here, and he's going to tell you his story about catching a 52 twice in the first 6 weeks of the season coming up. So can't wait to hear that one, and nice to see you, Noah.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
All right.
It's really nice to have Noah and Lisa here, right, John, doing the technical stuff. Could you imagine if they left that part up to us?
We wouldn't have a broadcast, Brent. If the people knew how dumb we actually were when it comes to technology, It's all Noah and all Lisa. So Brent and I are very grateful that you two are here. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
And having said that, let's hope it all works out. We're going to start out our information part of tonight with me telling you how the spawn works. Let's talk about pre-spawn, the spawn, and post-spawn, and why this is important to your success at the start of the season. In Canada, muskie seasons are designed to open 2 weeks. In fact, just about all fishing seasons are designed to open 2 weeks after a normal spawning period. And that's because we don't stock anywhere in this country. And the success of that spawn, again, dictates entirely the future population of muskies, of muskies in our water. So for natural fisheries, the spawn is absolutely the most critical time. And when it happens at the start of the season is all based on temperature. And so how you're going to fish for muskies, where you're going to find muskies, whether you're big females who recover slower than your males are ready to go, are all questions that the temperature of your system is going to tell you. So on pre-spawn, before the season, your muskies are spawning from 50 to 59 degrees, 49 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. In Canada, that's 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Peak spawning time, 55 degrees, 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. But they can spawn, depending on the system, they can spawn anywhere in that 10 degree range. So in a pre-spawn situation, before you reach that temperature, your muskie population has spent all winter staging near where they want to spawn. And they want to spawn in exactly the same location every year. Muskies live for up to 35 years in the north. And for that entire life cycle, they will try to spawn in exactly the same location. Not just a bay or not just a tributary, which are their two favorite places to spawn, but in the exact same location in that bay or the exact same location in the tributary. And so depending on how water levels pan out in the spring, your fish can have access to great success to that location that they're really good at spawning, that they're really used to spawning in and have great success. Or if you have extra high water, extra low water, then the spawn is somewhat compromised. Here on the Ottawa River, we have 13 dams that control the 900 miles of the Ottawa River and keep the levels meticulously constant, or mostly meticulously constant, unless you have, of course, 300-year flood years, which we had in 2017, 19, and 23. And so what that means is we have constant recruitment on the Ottawa River. Every year, there's a successful spawn, or almost every year, a successful spawn, and we have that population replenishing itself and continuing to go. A lot of fisheries have year classes. And so depending on water levels, depending on temperatures, depending on light penetration in the water and weed growth, you have a successful spawn, which produces a good year class of fish, or you have an unsuccessful spawning season, which produces a much lesser recruitment rate. And so you end up with year classes. And so it's common in a lot of natural reproducing fisheries to say, yeah, we had a great year this year, then 2 bad years, then a great year, then 3 bad years, then 2 good years, and so on and so forth. And so that spawn and the success of that spawn is going to determine, again, your future population. The actual spawn, I mentioned that muskies like to spawn in bays, and in tributaries. That's the most 2 common places for them to spawn. And it's actually thought from a lot of the research, telemetry research that we've done here in Canada, the muskies may indeed spawn in 2 different locations. We had a fish on the Rideau River, one of the main tributaries of the Ottawa River here in town, in the water right beside Carleton University, where most of our research is conducted out of Cook Labs, that swam back and forth between 2 locations. One was at the base, a weed bed just below a set of rapids, off to the side, and the other location was about 2.5 or 3 kilometers downriver. And for all the days between the 49 and 59 degree temperature, that fish swam back and forth between those two locations. So I don't know that it's been proven, but it's been theorized that muskies may indeed spawn in two locations, spawn in two different and distinct locations. I looked at, if you want to flash up a banner just to give people a reference, we have a lot of seminars on the Musky Factory YouTube channel, and we've had Dr. Sean Landsman on a great many times talking about musky biology, musky behavior. He is my favorite biologist in the modern day, somebody who cares and somebody who knows. And so he did a terrific show with us on describing the spawn. We're going to try and include some of that tonight, but instead I just decided I would steal from Sean's notes and tell you about them myself and give Sean some credit, with which I just did. So there we go. Muskies spawn often in pairs or in groups with one female and several males. Muskies are spray spawners. And so what that means is they don't make a nest. They spray their eggs over an area, which is a very inefficient way of all the ways that fish spawn. It is a very inefficient way of endorsing or causing recruitment. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in spray spawning. And so just take away that they're very, very inefficient. Muskies try to spawn over emerging vegetation, which is a really important concept for you to understand in hunting fish in the spring, depending on where they are when your season opens or where they are in the spawn. If you're allowed to fish for them, then that emerging vegetation is an absolute key. And eggs, although we used to think they're sticky, they are mildly sticky. But eggs that fall onto emerging vegetation have a much higher chance of turning into fry and offspring and eventually a giant muskie. Eggs that fall into silt or fall to the bottom usually die of oxygen starvation. So in systems with high dirty water in the spring or flooding, you usually have very much an increase in siltation. And that siltation is got a negative effect on the survival rate of those eggs. And so an egg's enemy, you might say, is that silt in the spring. And so we'll go with that. Muskies spawn from 1 to 6 feet deep, from right up to the shoreline, out to about 6 feet deep in general. And they spawn in the same locations as pike. Pike, the peak of their spawning occurs at 50 degrees. And in general, pike spawn shallower than muskies. So they're 1 to 3 feet, maybe 1 to 4 feet in general, whereas muskies can be 1 to 6 feet and tend to be 3 to 6 feet. When muskie eggs are hatching, pike are big enough to predate on muskies. So that balance that's maintained between a muskie population and a pike population in a system is absolutely critical. And we'll talk about that more later on in the show. But in a lot of cases, that balance was achieved naturally over 10,000 years. At the end of the last ice age, all of our muskies came up the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico and spread out through the Great Lakes. And before man's intervention, those systems were always naturally maintained. And then the intervention of man has changed a lot of those things. We'll talk about that in greater detail as we go through the show. Males and females behave differently during spawn. Male muskies tend to go to the spawning site and sit and wait because they know that the girls are going to be there sooner or later. And so they hang out at the spawning site or just on the outside of the spawning grounds and escort the females who tend to visit they come and go. I talked about that big fish a moment ago that visited 2 locations. They come and go. If they stayed at a location, they would get harassed nonstop. And so it's not comfortable for them. They just leave and they'll come back when they're in the mood, when it's their time to spread eggs, visit and leave. The males will stay around. And so that's an important distinction to make, because depending on what your temperature is, depending on where your fish are, I've had a season start off with 13 male muskies in a row because we were fishing related to spawning beds, and on the outside of the spawning beds, the females were gone. Catching 13 fish in the first 3 days of the season isn't a bad thing. You know, our guests are usually pretty happy with a 4 or 5 fish day, and so most of those fish are 39 to say 42 inches long. They're all cookie cutter muskies that we're catching, but that can happen depending on on where fish are in the recovery rate. Your females are tending to recover away from the spawning grounds, and so they're the first ones to leave. Arunus Laskoskas, I'll throw a shout out to him, a tremendous researcher. From his research on Georgian Bay in following muskies, he determined that the females in leaving, there was a lot of female muskies around docks and highly active docks and under boats and such, and you wouldn't know they were there unless you were following them with a transmitter, but they were recovering more in deeper water and away from the rest of the fish. So 2 different behaviors to be aware of depending on what you're targeting on what you're targeting and what you're going for at the start of the year. So that's enough about the spawn. Let's get on to talking to our special guests. I always tend to go a little bit too long. I hope my teammates. Yeah, enough from you, Brent. I can sit already. Enough from me. And let's go on to Lisa, who has a really awesome video about first day of musky fishing last year. Was it last year, Lisa?
Might be 2 years ago now.
2 years ago. First time out on the Rideau River, which is one of the tributaries of the Ottawa, which the season's open 2 weeks earlier in the year on waters, again, based on when fish are going to spawn, based on water temperatures. So maybe I'll just be quiet, and why don't we play that video?
All right, I'm just going to pull it up here real quick. So I'll just start off by saying to one of my favorite parts about this video is just the raw emotion from Ashley. Ashley Ray from SheLovesToFish.com. She is a very calm, collected person, doesn't swear a whole lot. And this muskie just brought out the best of her. So we did have to bleep quite a bit of this video out, and we'll talk about it when it's done.
It's so hard. Tiny bit of chop. Yeah. Nice.
This feels super weird. It's like they're gonna hit the water. Lisa, hold up. God, what the? By the way, I wasn't yelling at you. I was just shocked. Holy! What just happened?
Oh my god.
Lisa,
No, here.
that thing's thick as. Lisa.
Yeah, so that was a pretty special one. It was her birthday, and as you can tell from the emotion, it was needed for sure. The interesting thing about that fish was we had just completely switched our tactics for the day. You can see we kind of had blue sky conditions. We'd actually spent the last probably hour and a half, 2 hours jigging in about 18 feet of water. And we had moved like 7 or 8 fish jigging, but they were coming in slow. They were circling. And we could just tell from the mood of the fish that they were just not having it. So we decided to switch up the strategy and just try and get a bait in the fish's face. And that's exactly what happened. We went to a weed line. You can see as soon as that Suick landed, and she did one pull, and that fish came off the weed line and just ate. So it was kind of a great day.
Wow. Tremendous video. I got to say, I've known Ashley a long time, and I don't think I've ever heard Ashley swear except in that video. And so she saved it up and she got it all out at once. That is raw emotion, and that is just fantastic. That's the season opener, your first day of the year out on the water, and you were fishing in 17 or 18 feet of water. And you contacted 7 or 8 muskies. So that is not a normal opening day strategy for a lot of people. Why'd you go out in deep water to start, Lisa? What were you thinking?
Well, we found bait. That was the main thing. We had done a little bit of trolling. We were working up and down a weed line, and we were seeing bait deep. So we decided to go use the live scope and jig a little bit and see what we could get going. And yeah, those fish were there.
Do you remember what the water temperature was?
Yeah, it was the last 2 years. I just looked back through my records. Actually, the water temps have been really high. So either high 60s, and in fact, actually last year on opening day on the Rito, it was 70.4.
Wow. So those fish are way past the spawn.
Yeah.
They're way into the way into recovery. That fish had some girth on it as well. Starting to put a feed bag on. And so that post-spawn bite is fierce. And when they get on it, some really magical things can happen. So kudos for you figuring that out. Kudos to you for going out in deeper water. And maybe a key learning point in something that Lisa just said is she went back and checked her logs. And so all of us are Muskies Canada members, and one of the smartest things that we have learned through Muskies Canada is keeping logs. We submit logs. That gives us catch per unit efforts. It helps us shape regulations and legislations related to muskie management. But as an angler, it can be one of your greatest tools for success. And so, you had warm water to be able to go back to your logs, to be able to go back to your logs and look, what was it like when the water temps were still in the high 50s in the season open? What was it like when they were in the low 60s, mid 60s, high 60s, and so on? And those patterns that worked or didn't work on those years are going to tell you what to do, what strategies to employ, what strategies not to employ. Musky fishermen are like everybody. We are creatures of habit. And so without that ability to look back and determine what worked and what didn't work, a good chance we're just going to go and do the same thing. Your logs make you a better angler, and make you a better angler all year, and make you a better angler, especially at the opener. So really well done, Lisa. What a video. What a first fish of the year on opening day. What a nice start. And so
couldn't have happened to a better person. So if you're not following Ashley Ray on social media, you should be. She's just an amazing content creator and a great person. So
yeah, I'll agree to that. And Ashley has been on the podium at the biggest bass tournaments in North America. She has been on the podium at the biggest kayak fishing tournaments in North America. She has successfully caught 50-inch muskies from her kayak. Whatever swims, Ashley is great at catching. And more than that, she's a teacher and a great person. So shout out to you, Ashley, as always.
I got one more quick pick to share with you from this day. We had a brand new thriller out, and the cool thing is that you sort of see in this picture here, the fish actually left us a souvenir. There's a tooth embedded right in the thriller, so she kept that.
Not an uncommon thing for the wooden baits to have a tooth stuck in them. So yeah, it happens from time to time. And even the plastic baits, I've had teeth stuck in both sides of a plastic jerk bait in the past. So fantastic stuff. Brent Bocek, I know
Yes,
you have spoken a lot in the past about opening day considerations. Brent usually hangs out in the Kawartha Lakes, 33 amazing and beautiful lakes that used to have just muskies, and now a lot of them have pike in them. But why don't you tell us what you're looking for and what you're thinking about on opening day in the Kawartha, Brent?
Well, kind of, if you think about what Kyle Free just said last month, one thing we got to take into consideration is how our weather was, what kind of winter we had, what kind of spring we had. We've had a pretty good winter here. Everything was frozen over. We had more snow this year than ever, which is actually good for our water levels, right? Because you have a lot less evaporation on the Great Lakes. All that snow melts, goes into the waters, so it's good for our water levels. But I'm expecting the water temperatures to be a little cooler this year when I do get up into the Kawartha fishing. Can you pull that? Can you pull that slide up that I have there? So one thing that I like to take into consideration in the springtime is, especially years like what I think this is going to be, one of those years where we've had a really cold winter and a cooler spring. Where do the fish spawn? Right? We know where they're going to spawn. We know where they spend their summers. But if those weed growth isn't up high enough, where are they going to go in between spawning and their summer range? So, right, that little, see where I got the green line there, or the green circle? That's a great big weed bed, and that's in the north end of a bay. It's not the north end of a lake, but it's in the north end of a bay. So the water gets a little bit warmer in there with that sun. Back up right in top of that little bay there, I know muskies do spawn in there. So one of the first places they'll come out is stop in that weed bed there. If you look at, I'd like to blow that up a little bit more if we could. I don't know if it's possible or not, but there's a point. There's a point in there as well. Not the big point out at the very end of the bay, but just on the top of where the green circle is, there's a little bit of a point there. There's rock and weed on that point. At another place those fish will stop on their way out after spawning. They're going to hang out there for a little bit because they know, whether they know by the temperature or whatever, they know when their weed beds are ready for them for their summer ranges. So these are places, I'm going to hit these places where I think they're traveling as they head towards their summer ranges. Again, there's a green line on there. That's a weed bed there as well. So they come out of their spawning area. They can set up in that first weed bed. They can set up on that point where the rock is. And where that rock is, there's great big boulders. That water is going to warm up just a little bit more around there as well. And then they can come along that point where that weed bed is to go out into the main lake or when they're heading for their summer ranges. One thing we got to take into consideration there, when the water does start to warm up in the spring, keep in mind, I think we've talked about this before, but muskies are cold-blooded. When the water is warm, everything they eat digests a lot quicker, so they actually have to eat more. And John, you were talking about how many 50-inch fish were caught in June. It's because, that water's getting warmer, things they eat are digesting quicker, and they got to eat. They have to eat. Where in the fall, a lot of the fish are heavier in the fall due to egg production, and migratory fish are easier to target because they're in smaller areas. So when you hear people talk about fish put in the feed bag in the fall, that's not necessarily true, but they're following the bait coming into their spawning areas, and there's more fish in concentrated areas in places like St. Clair or Georgian Bay, coming out of the, say, Lake Ontario into the St. Lawrence or Lake Erie into the Niagara River. Those big migratory fish are coming into smaller areas, so they're easier to target. But in the springtime, it's those places where the fish are leaving the spawning area. You got to figure out where they're stopping on the way to the summer ranges, and they can really pay off big time.
Next level thinking, Mr. Bocek. You are a thinking man's musky fisherman. I like the way you approach that. And so, yeah, depending on what the temperature is on opening day is going to tell you if you want to be close to the spawning grounds, on the edge of the spawning grounds, or whether your fish are done spawning and are starting to move off to that summer home range. And you're right, it's a process. It's often several weeks for them to move off. But if you can hit that day that those big females especially are starting to move away from the spawning beds, starting to head off for their recovery, starting to put that feed bag on, you can have something magical. I wish I had a picture of Brad Rose on. We had Brad just shows up. I fish with his brother Kent regularly. Fantastic guy. And Brad just shows up, and invariably Brad shows up and 50s just chase Brad's lure, jump on Brad's lure. We had a day with Brad a couple years ago where we hit it right, and Brad had 4 50s on in probably 5 hours. Luckily, he caught the fourth one. I think that's in a post from a week or two ago on the Ottawa River Musky Factory Facebook page if you want to go and check that out. But that's the kind of thing that lining up that post-spawn bite, lining up fish on the move will do for you. And so kudos.
And one thing to touch on that, if there's very, very little weed growth, those fish will either come onto the rocks for somewhere to sit, or they're going to move out a little bit deeper. So if there's no weeds, you gotta figure that out. They're on the rocks, or if they're a little bit deeper, and that rock is going to warm up a little bit more too, right? With the sun. Yeah,
you hit on another interesting point. Just mentioned it briefly, but it's worth mentioning again. That's the north side of the lake, the north side of a bay, the north side of any water system. Just because of the angle of the sun, tends to warm up quicker. A lot of fish will seek that out. Your weeds grow earlier and quicker in that warmer water, and so the fish know that. They've been around every year for a long time. They know that. They use that as well. So north side over south side, protected north side, bays on the south side just as well, but that protected north side of the bay. That's what you're looking for. All right, Noah, Oliveira Hill, you have an incredible fish story. I've seen a lot of posts lately about people catching fish twice on Musky Insider, a great place to learn, but I haven't seen too many posts where somebody catches a giant fish, a 52, 2 times in 6 weeks. Why don't you show us some pictures and tell us what you're thinking, what's going on?
Lisa, can you pull that up? All right. So you guys basically just said everything I was going to say, because this fish here was exactly what you guys said. So I'll tell it the way it happened. Last year I had a rough start to the season because I didn't have my boat. So I missed the first 2 days of the opening season, but I managed to get out in a tin can. I was in a pontoon, but that was because a friend of mine was able to come over and help me, measure the fish, because I didn't have a bump board the first time I caught her. So I'll tell the story as it is. I went out. Within 10 minutes, I hooked into this fish. It was a weed bed that I catch fish on throughout the entire season. But the difference here with this is the way the wind was blowing, it was an east wind. So normally on an east wind, I'm looking for spots that the wind's blowing into, but it's tough because we usually have a west wind on this body of water. So I was casting a glide bait, and this fish came off of a really shallow rock point, covered around a weed bed close to a spawning ground. And it ate immediately. Literally one twitch of my bait, and bang, it was on. Reeled it in. I was solo, so I had to fight the fish out, and got it in the bag, luckily. And I got it in the net, and called my buddy to come over, because I went out with the bare minimum stuff. I had literally just 1 or 2 rods, a couple baits, my net, hook cutters and whatnot. I wasn't expecting to catch a fish. I literally went out just for the evening bite, and it was a great fish. My personal best at the time. And then about 6 weeks later, I was out fishing in a complete different spot. It was about 2 kilometers from where I first caught her. Evening bite, and it was a new moon. I was casting, and yeah, it was about 4 feet of water or so. Hooked into her. Caught her on top water, actually. Yeah, there's the other photo. So it was just after sunset. Caught it on top water. I had a good group of guys with me. Got to experience the thrill. It was surreal, honestly. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know it was the same fish until the day after. I was looking at photos, and on the anal fin of the fish, you can see a cutout in the fin. It was a little bit thicker the second time I caught her, but it was literally the exact same length. Obviously, it didn't really grow much in 6 weeks, but it had a cutout in the fin. And the next day I was looking back at photos. I'm like, oh my God, that's the same fish. So yeah, that's basically the story. First time I caught her, yeah, she was sitting on the rock shoal. We had a pretty warm season last year. Ice out was mid-March, late March. The water temps, I couldn't even tell you what the water temps were on opener because I didn't even have a fish finder on my tin can the first time I caught her. But yeah, it was good.
Heck of a story. What a fish to catch twice, proving that catch and release works. I went out with the bare minimum. I only had 2 rods, and yeah.
Actually, I want to say one other thing there about catch and release works. The first time I caught her, I was solo, so I had to fight the fish out a little bit more than I usually would like to. But I got her in the bag, and she was upright. My family friend was out in his boat right there. He was over within 2 minutes, and got out, quick measurement, pictures, put her back. But she was exhausted, more than I've honestly ever seen with a fish. I stayed with that fish for almost 20 minutes before she swam off. She kicked after about 5 minutes, and I was trying to get the wind and the waves were coming in from the east. We were trying to position her head into the wind, and she kicked. She swam off. But then after that, she came back up. I saw her. She was about 50 yards out, and she came up, and I saw her tail kick, and I'm like, this fish is not ready. So I went back. I grabbed her. I actually got out of at that point. I was back onto where I caught her, so it was pretty shallow water. So she came out of about like 2.5, 3 feet of water, and I stood kind of in the water there with her for a little bit, and then eventually she swam off.
Good story. Good for you for making sure that fish was able to swim away. Good for you for recognizing that fish was in trouble and needed more help. Again, the spawn is the roughest time of year on fish. A third of a fish's body weight is eggs in a female. And so picture spewing out 1/3 of your body weight. That's leaving a ripped up cavity inside of that fish, and that recovery is going to take some time. So you touched on the Brent Bocek rocks near the spawning ground theory. So
also because it's the warmest water too. The rocks reflect the sun, and that fish was staging. It was and I caught her just off of her spawning ground, most likely, because it was a creek mouth with some marshes and whatnot. And a few hundred meters out, rock point, weeds around it. She was sitting right on that rock point, absorbing the sun, and the wind was coming in just perfect. So it was blowing all the bait fish, plankton, the smaller fish were all blowing right into there. She was just obviously using that spot to feed, and then she moved on to her summer range within the next few weeks, and luckily I got to catch her again. So I know where I'll be when the water is that temperature this year.
Absolutely. Well done. Wind from the east brings out the beast.
Yeah.
Not generally a numbers day for us a lot of the time, but it's a big fish day. A lot of people fear that east wind up here on the Ottawa River. We love that east wind. It's a chance at a really big fish, and dreams often come true on those days. Let's talk about our best and our worst. Maybe let's see. Do we have any comments from people? I'll ask Lisa to have a look at that, and maybe we'll talk about our best and our worst season openers. I have photos of the same fish in 2000. Josh. 2011 winter. Accidental catch 2017, July, September, then in October.
Wow.
Good catch and release habits with minimal handling works well. Kudos to you, Josh. Kudos for recognizing that it's the same fish. That pattern on the side of the fish never changes. You can see in Noah's fish, it was a different looking pattern, but if you look close, that pattern is the same and is always there. And so they're looking at using artificial intelligence to identify muskies based on those patterns, specifically cheek patterns and a portion of the side where the pattern is easily visible to help us going forward for Muskies Canada log. So not implemented yet, but we'll get to track an individual fish through its life more and possibly see when more anglers or different anglers caught it as well. So neat recognition. Best and worst season opener, Brent Bocek, what do you got?
Well, last year was absolutely brutal for me for the opener. We had a cold front come in, and I think that really had an effect on it. As hard as we worked shallow, we worked deep, we worked rocks, we worked weeds. It was just we got some fish, but it was very, very tough, very tough. And I'm accrediting that to opening day. You have a cold front roll in, and it lasted for most of the week. Whereas about 7 years ago or so, we had an extremely I think it was a full moon on the opener, and we got that week we landed 16 fish in 7 days, 16 muskies in 7 days. That doesn't include the fish we seen and fish that we lost. It also doesn't include the bunch of pike that we caught and the bunch of walleyes that we got on musky bait. So I know we had the one day we landed 6 fish, and I think 3 were muskies, and then we had we had pike in there, and we had walleye in there as well, all on musky baits. And that was out during a full moon, like a couple days before the full moon, a couple days after the full moon, and the water temperatures were up. We had an early spring. Fish where I wanted them, where I was hoping they would be, and it all worked out real well. 2 weeks later, excuse me, 2 weeks later, I was doing some filming with a fella, and we actually encountered 2 days of fishing. We encountered 20 muskies, and we landed 9 of those fish. And that month, I think, fishing opening week and then weekends after that, we landed 30 fish just in June itself, and some real quality fish. But part of it was like that 7 years ago or so, was we had a full moon, and then 2 weeks later we had the new moon, and I think that helped. Also, that those 2 days where we seen 20 fish, we landed 9 of them. We also had a lot of cloud cover. We had a bit of rain, so we had a nice front coming in, which also helped, I think, because some of those fish that we caught were on rock points that if it's high skies and calm, those fish aren't on those points. And we picked up 2 fish the one day on the point, about a 40-inch tiger and then a 44-inch muskie as well. And the next day, I said that the wind kind of picked up and changed, and I said to the guy, I said, we got the exact same conditions as yesterday when we got those fish. We need to hit that point. Went over to that point again. We got another tiger and another muskie over 40 inches off that point. And these are Kawartha fish, so those fish over 40 inches are really nice there.
Well thought out. Noah on the new moon, Brent on the full moon. Those are both key moons earlier in the year and probably mean more for muskie success the end of June and early July than a lot of other times of the year.
No, I'm not saying don't go fishing if your sonar table says it's a 15% day, because a couple years ago I got one a 30-pound class fish where it was 15% day on your sonar table, and it was at the lowest peak of the day. So those as long as you get your fish or your bait in front of the fish, you have a chance of catching them. So you'll never catch them from the couch, no matter what your moon phase is.
Good job, Brent. Lisa, you just showed us an awesome video of a terrific opening day. You got another story or two on your best and worst openers, maybe?
I got a picture from one of my worst openers, actually. Had a long-term Musky factory client, Muskies Canada member, and now friend, Bruce Ogilvie, down, and we had terrible conditions. He booked multi-days. Literally, we had this massive system come through right before he arrived, 50 millimeters of rain. So we had post-frontal. The water was like chocolate milk, debris in the river. It was tough. And I'll give Bruce credit. I've never seen someone grind out tough conditions like that. There was no quitting him. He just kept casting. We had managed to hook into a fish, unfortunately, and lost it jigging. But other than that, we were not seeing fish move at all. So by day 3 post-frontal, the water was still incredibly murky, but we found some water that was just slightly less murky. So we found the clearest water we could, and we worked that back day really hard. He was throwing a high vibration blade. He actually had stagger blades. We wanted something that was going to move water and make a lot of noise. And like I said, he just kept casting, and he managed to hook into his new personal best. So it was a pretty special day, especially considering, like I said, how hard he had worked for that fish. But it all worked out in the end.
Kudos to you for telling a story about tough times. Everybody has tough times. You fish what you're given. You know, we book our charters in the winter in most cases, and so we don't sell blue skies and sunshine, and we don't sell fish. We go out and we fish the conditions that we have, and one fish in 2 days sometimes is great success. And the fact that it was there's Bruce. What a fun guy to spend time in the boat with. A new PB. You know, if you ask somebody if somebody who's been around fishing for a little while, would you rather have a bunch of fish? Would you rather have a new PB? If it was just one fish and a new PB, the answer would be a new PB for somebody who's been there. So kudos to Bruce. What a nice fish. What a nice reward. Well done, Lisa. Good job. Noah, what do you want to say about maybe not your worst? You got another best day story?
Yeah, well, obviously last year was a great start. Got that fish within 10 minutes of the start of my season. Had a lot of high 30-inch fish after that. Nothing that big, though, until mid-July, honestly. And then I caught some high 40s. 2023 was surprisingly probably my best start of a season. That being said, we had really high water in 2023. First day I was out, I caught 2 fish, assuming they were males, high 30, mid 30-inch range, like literally back to back in the exact same spot. I'm like, was this the same fish? But it wasn't. And then the next day I went out and we caught, I think we boated 4 fish in an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Biggest being around a 42, 43, but they were all good fish. They were all healthy, fat. They were really fat, actually. Now I'm thinking back on it, 2023, we had at least for me, I found the fish a lot thicker than they normally are at the start of the season. And the topwater bite for me was on. So that day we caught 4 in the evening. 3 of them were on topwater, and 1 of them was on a blade. So yeah.
Fantastic. Some really interesting dynamics to that story. On the lower Ottawa and Lake of Two Mountains, 2023 was a flood year. Flood year in the Ottawa, and it was in your section as well. But the lower sections, the water was high and brown and dirty and made fishing conditions really tough. That dirty water at the start of the year is really tough for us to catch fish in. And so you're in the same river, just in a different section, fishing an area that's got a lot more visibility, and obviously muskies that are in a whole lot different mood than elsewhere. Yeah. So same river, different places, different conditions.
Absolutely. Looking back on it, like I don't think it was much dirtier than it ever was, previously with high water. It was a pretty normal year because we had high water, right? At least where I was, kind of in the early May portion. And then after that, things kind of stabled out. And come musky season, our musky season opens later, right? And towards the end of June. So I don't know. It was a good start. I think we had some warmer weather before that, so the water temps were good. That's why I was catching fish on top water. It was a great start. 2023 was arguably my best season.
Fantastic. Interesting points in that same river, different sections, different results based on the water in that section looking differently. So well done. Got any more comments you want to throw up, Lisa? Comments or questions from people?
Yeah, we have a couple of good questions actually. Here's one from Michael. He's wondering, going back to talking about the murky water, do you guys use spinnerbaits when the rivers are like chocolate milk?
I think spinnerbaits are a great choice when you have low visibility, because the fish not only hunt by sight, but they use their lateral line, right? So they can't see it as well. If they can hone in on it from the vibration, I think it's key.
I love spinnerbaits at the start of the year. Rob Day has made spinnerbaits out of Ottawa. We used to think we invented trolling spinnerbaits for muskies, and so they're single hook deer tail spinnerbaits. They have a blade combination that puts off a vibration like nobody's business, so much so that you can hear it off the side of your boat. And what the single blades allow you to do, one of the few times of year that I really like the single blades, because it lets you go back into a foot or 2 feet of water in the spawning bays and see if there's fish in there. And oftentimes the next day, where you were fishing the day before, the weeds are now too high for you to fish, too high or too thick for you to bring a bait through. And so you're moving out following that emerging weed growth in a lot of cases. And so spinnerbaits, absolutely terrific bait at the start of the season. For us, musky factory baits, we use hybrids, a bait where the front hook, both hooks on it are treble hooks, and the hook is always in the right position. The only thing I don't like about the single hook spinner baits is you lose fish, and I hate losing fish. They just don't come, they just come undone, or you lose them, or you lose more around the boat. So love Rob Day spinner baits, single hook spinner baits at the right time. Use them with the treble when I can. Use hybrids.
Those Rob Day spinner baits, John, have paid off big time for me in the Kawartha Lakes. I'm a caster, but every now and then when you have to troll, I'll troll those over shallow waters, 30 to 50 feet back. If you're standing up in the boat, you can see them in the water still, right? And I've, what I'm saying about single hooks, I touch wood. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've never lost a fish on one of those Rob Day spinner baits with the single hooks. And I've even got walleye on them. Imagine that, trolling 5 miles an hour and having a walleye crash at a foot from the surface.
Yeah.
People think walleye aren't aggressive, but they got to swim to catch their fish, to catch their meal, right?
We've caught 5 to 6 pound walleyes off of Rob Days long time ago, in just off the weeds in the spring. And so, not all walleyes are doing the same thing. You've got your deep walleyes, and you've got a lot of walleyes that we catch in the spring in 2 and 3 and 4 feet of water, or 5 and 6. And so, yeah, cool.
It's hard to be disappointed when you catch a 5 pound walleye, right? When you're musky fishing.
No, it's not good. It's not a muskie. We're just there for one thing at that time. But you're right. A 5 pound walleye is a beautiful fish. I think I have a couple of pictures to throw up, and it'll tie in nicely with what. Okay, so this is July 9th. This is a 55 by 25 and a quarter inch fish that we caught. And so it's in the 3rd week after the spawn. And you were talking about thick fish, Noah. And so this was after a dirty water spring. And our fish get really fat really quickly a lot of years after the spawn. And so, I mean, that's a fall girth for 90% of the musky fisheries out there. That's a big fish that's filled with eggs late in the fall, but it's not. It's a fish that's been on a post-spawn feed. And what happens when you have high, dirty water in the spring? It's tough for muskies to. One of the places that you find muskies and you find all your fish is out of the current, because nobody wants to run in the dark. Nobody wants to move around in the dark when you can't see. And so they end up in off current areas, in back eddies, in low current areas, and they end up in a pool with a whole lot of other fish, a whole lot of bait fish. And everybody will sit in there for 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 days. And so if you picture a muskie in there, not moving around much, it's just food just keeps showing up. It is so easy for that fish to put the feed bag on. This was one of those years, high water, dirty water, and the fish getting to put a feed bag on early. July 9th, super girth, 40-pound fish. So, yeah, it can happen. It can happen. Second fish, second slide. My good friend Tim Handley, topwater fish. First week of the season, and again, look at the girth on that fish. That fish was caught out in deeper water on a topwater bait, off of the traditional spawning ground. So within sight of it, but out off of it. And again, a really fat fish early on in the spring. I'll say that the spawn happened early that year. We probably had a dirty water period again where it was really easy feeding for a muskie who's recuperating in a pool with a whole lot of other fish. And nice guy with a nice fish. I think everybody in Tim's family, including his dad, have 50-inch muskies out with us. So, hey Tim, love the beard, man. I know you're a clean cut guy these days. Love the old beard, the Grizzly Adams look, classic. Got another comment to throw up, Lisa?
Actually, I do. Here you go. Do your lure color choices vary by time of year?
Good question.
That's a very good question. Interesting. For myself, they only vary with where I'm fishing. If I'm fishing clear water, then I'm going to go more natural colors. Stained water, I'm going to go a lot with stuff with orange in it and whatnot. But yeah, good question.
I was going to say, as long as it's black and orange, then I'll throw it year round.
That's true. That color works all the time. What are your color considerations in the spring, Lisa?
Well, on the auto with the tannin stain water, contrast is a big thing. Then that's mostly what I'm looking at. And of course, and we talked about this before with the Suick Thriller episode, but you just can't go wrong with a white lure, white belly. If you think about muskies prey, what they're eating, 90% of the fish have a white belly, so that just makes sense. And of course, as Noah mentioned, orange on the Ottawa is just killer.
Orange everywhere is just killer. If you only had one color, if it wasn't black, it would be orange. And if it can be a combination of the both, that's it. I'll throw in my answer on that. My color choices in the spring vary depending on the clarity of the water. And so if we have dirty water, you need to get close to a fish. You need that fish to see or to feel your bait. And so I tend to go with much brighter colors in the dirty water and use rattles and use blades that give off more of a vibration. You got to and even fish a little bit slower in the dirty water. So in the spring, especially, Lisa, you mentioned the white belly. White is a great color for just about all species of fish. If you go back to when you were a kid, that little white Big O used to be one of the favorite lures of all people who angled. And so white baits are especially good in the spring and especially good later in the year when colors tend to fade in a lot of fish. And you're looking at more whitish bait fish in general. So an answer on color. Got another question?
I'm just going to add to that color thing because I was just been thinking about the Musky Monday seminar series, and when we had Dr. Sean Landsman on talking to us about muskies' eye structures and the way that they're set up. It for me, another important consideration is the depth of the water you're fishing when you're making your color choice, just because muskies' eyes are designed to see well in shallow water, and specifically reds, yellows, and oranges, which makes sense. So for me, I'm considering that more when I'm in shallow in the weeds versus when I'm jigging in 18 to 20 feet of water.
Very intelligent.
Sorry?
Very intelligent comments. Well thought out. I like that. I like that.
We did have another question here. I'm going to see if I can find it. Another question from Dean. He's wondering, how likely are stocked muskies to spawn?
I can answer that one. Stocked muskies are going to spawn just like regular muskies. They're going to go through the pre-spawn, the spawn, and the post-spawn rituals the same way that we have described them. The difference between the stocked fisheries, a lot of the stocked fisheries in the States do not support, the system does not support natural reproduction. So despite the fish going through the spawning cycle and spawning in the same locations, they will lay eggs, they will fertilize the eggs, they just will not hatch, they will not develop, they are not viable. And so those fisheries are maintained through stocking programs. And so I think of Cave Run, was down to fish about 20 years ago, really looked after well by the people in Kentucky and had a great time. But was down fishing an April PMTT event. And one of the strategies, the fish were spawning, and just finishing spawning. One of the strategies was to go and fish spawning fish, and throwing rattle traps at spawning fish is very acceptable technique in that environment. My partner and I talked about it, and we are hardwired not to bother fish when they spawn, and so it was something that we chose not to do, even though it was a good way to catch a fish. And so I think there were 280 anglers in that outing who caught 19 fish over 2 days. Now, it's not a put down of Cave Run. It is an incredible fishery. It has some really hot times, but that was the ultimate cold front on the season opener with high water, and it was really tough fishing for everybody in that tournament. So, that's a bunch of people who understand musky behavior, and tough times are just tough times. They're tough for all of us. We all struggle. And so, yes, they go through the spawn, the same routine. They spawn in the same places. It's a matter of whether it is viable or not. And so in our waters, leave them alone when they're spawning. Don't fish for them. Don't pretend you're pike fishing. You're just hurting that population. You're hurting your own catch rate down the road. You're hurting your kids. You're hurting everybody's catch rate down the road. So, good question.
And just to add to that quickly, John, because you're talking about situations where they're stocking fish with natural genes. In certain situations, they'll stock hybrids on purpose because they don't want the population to grow endlessly. And a lot of times, most of the time, hybrids are actually sterile.
That's true. Absolutely true. And so it's way easier to grow a hybrid than a natural fish. Hybrids eat Purina fish chow. Natural fish tend to, it's true, there is such a thing as Purina fish chow. Natural muskies much prefer live bait over natural and do not adapt well to that. So a much harder fish to live in. And stocking tiger muskies, beautiful fish. Tigers have been stocked throughout the U.S. For a lot of reasons, in a lot of cases to fix other errors. In New Mexico, to clean up 4 lakes that were taken over by goldfish, because you can buy a dozen goldfish cheaper than you can buy a dozen minnows. How could that go bad? But when the biomass of a lake becomes mostly goldfish, action had to be taken putting in muskies where there's a whole lot of orange fish. Oddly, is a good way to fix that problem. And then your tigers just go away. But what's usually found out is all of a sudden there's a whole lot of people who really like fishing muskies, and the stocking continues and goes on. So good points. Any other questions? Relevant questions right now?
Nope.
All right. Question for all of you. And we asked people at the start maybe to write in. What do you think of downsizing? A lot of people believe that downsizing their baits in the spring is the way to go. Fishing with smaller baits is the way to go. What do you guys think about that? Do you do it? Does it have any merit? Brent?
Yes, you know what? I used to think that way. Even salmon fishing guys think, you got to downsize in the spring, right? The alewives and smelt that are coming in to spawn in the spring are the same size they were in the fall, right? And those fish are coming in to eat on those. Musky fishing, I've experienced where I think I've told the story on here once already, but on all my wisdom, I forgot my net the one weekend walleye fishing in the spring in May, and I'm reaching down to grab a 14-inch walleye, and about a 40-inch muskie comes up to grab it. Well, after I checked my language, what I was saying, and counted my fingers, made sure they're all there, I started thinking, you know what? That's trying to eat a 14-inch walleye. That's it's not looking to eat a 4 or 5-inch perch. It's still trying to eat a 14-inch walleye. And since then, I don't downsize at all in the spring. And the only time I might is if there's a cold front, if things aren't working out, if things just aren't going right for us, cold front, weather patterns or something, things aren't working with my traditional size baits, I may downsize then. But other than that, downsizing in the spring, the big curly Sue, which stretches out to the body itself is 9 inches, and then that's another 9 inches behind it. I've got fish opening weekend on these. So right after we went through a bunch of boats, followed another boat onto a weed line. That boat left. We pulled in. I said to our guys, you know what? Just because they left or just because they fished here doesn't mean we can't catch a fish there. And 5 minutes later, we got a fish on the big curly Sue. So downsizing in the spring, absolutely no need to.
All right. Well thought out answer. Lisa, what do you got? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page with Brent for sure. I only tend to downsize more based on conditions. So if I have a day where the fish are just terribly inactive, sometimes you don't want dinner, you'll take a snack though. One comes by your face. So yeah, for me, I'm not downsizing in the spring. We got a good comment here actually from someone. If I grow old enough to become weaker, I will downsize.
Or start trolling.
We all become trollers in the end, man. We all become trollers in the end. So just how it is. Noah, what do you like? You like big baits or small baits?
Same thing. Yeah. Like 10-inch bait, no problem throwing that at the start of the year. I've caught 40-inch fish on cannonballs in the first weekend of opener. That being said, a small bait in August, like I've caught a 48.5 on an 8-inch. No reason to be throwing a smaller bait that day. The conditions were right, but no, a fish an easy meal. They'll eat anything. They can eat something, 2/3 of their own body weight, or they're happy to at least try. So a 10-inch bait, no worries. 12-inch bait, 14-inch bait, you can throw it.
I concur. We have a smart panel with us this evening. I agree with all of you. There was a time when I downsized. I don't anymore. Good size baits right off the bat. The time to downsize is, like all of you explained, when your conditions are tough, when you're not moving fish, when you're not seeing follows. Those high 30s males, up to 40-inch males, I view them as teenagers. You can offer them, instead of a full meal deal, you can offer them a piece of pizza. They're going to say yes right away. So
this is more something I do in the summer, John. I just want to add this in, being our final one for right now episode here. High skies. I used to have a trailer in the Quartzes. The guy would come up to you and goes, I can't believe you catch fish during these high skies, flat, calm days. when you're fishing these flat, calm, high sky days in the summertime and things aren't happening, I'll throw a spinner bait and I'll burn them as fast as I can to shake those fish loose off the weed beds or whatever. But sometimes I'll put like a rubber twister tail on the back end of it. This is an old bucktail here, but it's got a twister tail in there, if you can see that. And it just kind of bulks up your bait a bit. Put it on the treble hook, put it at the back. It kind of bulks it up a bit, and it just gives it that something different. And I think sometimes the fish isn't looking to eat it necessarily. They do come out and hit it, but I think it's something different, and they're curious, right? So just throw something a little different, work it really fast. Don't give them a really good chance to look at it, and that's paid off for us over the years.
Twist your tail on the end of your bait, or on any hook on your bait, because it's not going to affect the action on an inline. Is a really easy modification to do, and that action of that twister tail, it just looks inviting, enticing. Absolutely. What time we got, team?
12 minutes after.
12 minutes after. I'm shooting for an hour. We knew we'd go a little farther. We already do. So maybe we should start thinking about closing up, but have a couple things to say before we do that. Maybe we should get some thank yous in first. Brent, do you have some people that you think we should thank?
Yeah, I'd like to first of all thank our guests. And so Jesse Baker was on our first episode, and
Would someone
All
like
right.
to finish that?
I will take over for Brent Bocek and
There you go.
I'm back.
Good.
be back. You disappeared, but Jesse Baker was on our first episode.
Yeah, and you can follow her on Instagram, of course. Her and her husband, Doug Wagner, have some tremendous stuff on there. Glenn McDonald, 54 or Bust. I know he's got a YouTube channel there, 54 or Bust. Kyle Fregis was on with us. Beyond the 8 is his YouTube channel. He's got some really cool footage on there and some great information. And of course, we want to thank Mike Suick. He was a guest with us as well in our very first episode. And, want to thank Mike for giving us this platform, making the support he shows us, and for making those great baits that we all love throwing. And I'd like to thank you guys as well. For me, it's a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. We're probably 5-6 hours apart, distance-wise, on the highway to drive. And it gives us a chance to hang out, talk muskies, and have a little fun.
Absolute pleasure for me to hang out with all of you. The guests that we had on, absolutely outstanding. I think all of them over-delivered on their knowledge level, their experience level, their view of things, and just taking in new knowledge from them. So Kyle, Glenn, and Jesse, fantastic. And even Mike, the history stuff, the history of Suick and the pictures that he brought, just phenomenal. So and thanks especially to all of you out there on the interweb watching us. We really appreciate you being here. We are here because of you. We are here for you. So hopefully we have passed on a little bit of knowledge that will enable you to catch more fish, or your biggest fish, or just give you some different strategies when you have tough conditions, when you're faced with any conditions going into the season. So thanks everybody for being there. I want to close out, if I could. If you want to throw up, and I'll tell the team I've calmed down greatly since our dress rehearsal a little bit yesterday. So I think I can get this out. So Lisa, if you want to put. So there's two things this week on the internet in the musky world that are getting a ton of attention. One is this sign, "Attention Eagle Lake Anglers," regarding forward-facing sonar, regarding not fishing below 20 feet of depth. And so the discussions are, as most discussions are these days, are very polarized. And so there were a lot of people who posted this. I think Steve Heidig, I saw Tony Grant in with some terrific comments. Joe Bucher, just a lot of discussion, and I'll go back to this in a second. The other really neat thing that came out on the internet this week was the Musky Man video. If you haven't seen it, it's a tribute to Larry Ramsell. And a really well put together documentary looking at Larry's life and contribution and what the life of somebody who is addicted to muskies, which all of us are, is really like. It's an all-encompassing addiction. It is truly a love affair. And so I got to spend some time with Larry. I'm lucky enough to have fished with him. We had him as a guest on our Musky Monday seminar series. And so there's two quotes this week that I want to give you. First one from Larry Ramsell on, you got to fish where they live. And so if you think about that for a minute, Larry is targeting big fish, and his quote was in reference to catching big fish. And so if you want to catch big fish, you need to go to where they live. And if you want to catch lots of numbers of fish, you need to go where there's lots of numbers of fish. And so when this came out this week, the polarized discussion on whether Eagle Lake should restrict fishing had some really nasty comments about people who, from people who believed it's their complete and total right to go and fish with a forward-facing sonar, and it is. You do. You have the right to do that. You have the right to catch all the muskies, and you have the right to catch the very last muskie in the system, because muskie fishing is the Wild West, and there is no sheriff. And so we draw our own lines. We police ourselves. We police our own ethics. And I just want to point out to people the difference between a naturally reproducing fishery, where you do not have stocking, which is every fishery in Canada, versus a stocked fishery. Those are two different worlds. I don't know how to say it better than to say a stocked fishery is an aquarium. And I don't mean that derogatorily, because a place like Cave Run that is stocked, I absolutely love it. And a kid catching a muskie out of Cave Run, that kid is every bit as excited for catching that fish as you are catching a fish out of a live fishery. But just understand that a stocked fishery and a wild fish fishery are not the same at all. So in Canada, we don't stock anywhere right now. The last place that we had a concerted stocking effort was Lake Simcoe. We spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, trying to rehabilitate a muskie population that we as humans destroyed by overfishing and commercial fishing. And for all the effort and for all the time of all the volunteers and all the biologists and all the people who planted rice where these fish spawn, 20 years out, it's almost 20 years out since that stocking program was on, the results of bringing back that population were never achieved the way that they thought they were. And so when you destroy a naturally reproducing fishery, you can't fix it. We up here in Canada do not have the ability to put it back together, to restock it, to grow fish, to supplement it, to nurture it back to normal. So when I see somebody like the Eagle Lake Anglers Association putting this up, it's a place where they already have no night fishing. They have no fishing after dark. If you're at a lodge in Eagle Lake, you need to be back. All the boats need to be back, and the muskies are left alone. And so if somebody wants to protect their wild fish fishery, I 100% approve of that. I applaud that. And I think in the future, I hope that that becomes much more of the norm. Muskie fishing, the populations of muskie fishing, if you look at a graph over the last 20 years, have gone like this. Okay? There are some new fisheries that have come along. There are fisheries that blossom, but in general, musky populations have been in decline for quite some time. And you can associate that with a lot of reasons. The popularity of musky fishing has greatly increased. Technology has allowed people who don't have the experience to handle fish to go and find fish and catch them. Social media has meant people are going to work harder to get that perfect picture and compromise handling for fish. Sharpshooting with forward-facing sonar and the other terms, I don't even know them. I don't own a forward-facing sonar. I may get one. I may get one in the future, but I will really limit how I use it. Understand, please, that your forward-facing sonar will have a negative effect on the fishery you are in. If you are in a stocked fishery, it will have much less of an impact on the fishery. A lot of fish die off one year. You stock a lot of fish the next year. In 5 years, you grow a 48-inch fish, which you can do. That fish is 20 years old in the fishery up here. And that fish, as an apex predator, plays an integral role in maintaining the balance of the fish in that fishery. So as musky anglers, we have a lot of rights. We get to do whatever we want. If you think fishing fish in 80 feet of water is something to do because you can go and spot them, and I have people send me pictures and tell me about their great success because with their new technology, they can go out and find fish in 80 feet of water and they swim away, John, so they're okay. And I say, wow, just because they swam away doesn't mean they're going to survive. If you're using forward-facing sonar from my time speaking with Elmer Hayab, who his dad built the Ohio fishery, and he got me to talk about this on presentations I used to do in Ohio. In Ohio, when you're fishing fish in open water that has a thermocline in a reservoir in the summer, which you're fishing fish in open water with your forward-facing sonar a lot these days, when you release that fish, all the oxygen in that system, or pretty much all the oxygen in that system, is from the thermocline on up. And all your muskies, a majority of your muskies, are related to that thermocline. So you get on that behavior, you can catch a lot of fish. So when you release a fish, a lot of times it goes to the bottom. So if you release it in deep water, it goes to the bottom. And in a place like a reservoir that has a thermocline and warm water in the summer, going below that thermocline and going and settling in on the bottom, which a fish naturally does to rehabilitate itself, means almost certain death. So the difference between a stocked fishery and a wild fish fishery is night and day. And so I hope that those of us who are fortunate enough to fish on wild fish fisheries take action to put rules in place to protect that fishery from people who think it is their right to go and catch as many fish as they can without thinking about the future, without thinking about their neighbors, about thinking of the population in that lake, about, in the case of Eagle Lake, about what that lake means to the economy in a place where tourism is the biggest dollars that come into it. Everybody wants to go to Eagle because of the success they have at Eagle, because they have guarded that fishery for a long time, because they have implemented rules, because the fishermen around it, for the most part, respect it. And so you have the right to do whatever you want. And on an all-natural fishery where populations have been declining for a long time in the musky world, and technology is increasing our ability to catch fish, I say those fisheries need protection in a different way than maybe people understand if you don't live on it. An interesting point in the discussions about forward-facing sonar and your rights to use it is I didn't see any comments from old people my age and people older, people who have seen fisheries disappear and fisheries come back, fisheries been reborn in the States. Kudos to Tony Grant, who said stocking dollars are way harder to come by now. Getting fish stocked is way harder to come by. Green Bay, one of the best fisheries in the world in the modern day, is built off of stocking. Their stocking was reduced by 50% and will be further reduced, as I understand, going forward because of the expense involved in maintaining those fisheries. Wild fish fisheries and wild fish populations, all muskies deserve your protection. All musky lives are special, but wild fish fisheries, they deserve the most protection of all. So I hope we step up in Canada. I hope we implement more rules like the people of Eagle Lake have done for their fishery. I hope we raise fines and we use we use the dollars from those fines for more enforcement, and we perpetuate the life of those live fish populations, those wild fish populations. We have to. The populations are going like this. We have to change it. And today I got a note from my friend Eric Riley about the amazing. Eric is acutely aware of his fishery, and he fishes. He's one of the most scientific anglers I know. And he talked about the growth of the goby population, the explosion of the goby population in the Rideau system. The Rideau's near and dear to me because it's where I caught my first muskies over 50 years ago. And when that goby population explodes in the Rideau, that muskie fishery will probably die because we don't have a way to supplement it or to bring it back. It'll be a slow and painful death over a lot of years, but everywhere that gobies have gone, gobies have decimated the populations of non-bed spawners, of fish that are spray spawners, fish that don't nest and don't guard their eggs. So I'll leave you with this thought. The biggest threat to muskie populations everywhere is me and you. It's people. And so muskies need protection more than anything from people, from the invasive species that we let into their systems, from the invasive weeds that we let in that destroy their traditional spawning beds, from changing water levels that we put on a system for various reasons. The biggest enemy of a muskie is people. And so they need protection from us. They need protection from the people who think it's okay to go and catch as many as they can, to go and get theirs. And so I hope you catch as many muskies as you can this year. I hope you catch your biggest muskie. Tell us that you did it from something that you learned on this show. But all of us have a responsibility to look after those fisheries for now, and more importantly, for the future. And so hopefully you learned something from our broadcasts about that. We have talked conservation, and we do talk conservation in every episode and every presentation any of us have ever done. Conservation, we're all really grateful for being able to live the muskie life, for making a living doing what we absolutely live. None of us make a ton of money doing it. It is a pursuit of passion, and it all depends on the survival of the muskies that we catch in future populations. And so I'll leave you with that. Take care of your muskies. Take care of muskie populations, whether they're wild, whether they're stocked, it's up to us. Take care of your fish. And so I think we're going to close with a slide of our social media. If you want to go and do some more learning, you can follow our social media, Muskie Factory YouTube channel. There's probably 40 or 50 hours of seminars on there. Incredible guests, Pete Mena, Jim Sarek, all our favorite biologists, all our favorite muskie fishermen, Larry Ramsell, as I mentioned, learn more, catch more, learn how to take care of them better. And with that, I won't say goodbye because it's probably not our last Suick seminar series, but it's our last one for a little while. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for being here. Have your best years, everyone. We'll see you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.